Hello everyone and welcome to the 2Have 2Role podcast. My name is Oliver, and in this show Robin and I spoke to our friend Dave. Dave is a LARPer and a player in the Empire LARP system. He's in the Nation of Dawn. He plays the Troubadour archetype, which is basically a bard. Dave has a passion for performing and likes to exhibit that through his LARP characters. We talk about roleplay, we talk about roleplay bleed, we also talk about ballgowning in LARP. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you thumbs up, subscribe. If you're listening on your favorite audio platform, leave us a nice review so that other people can find us. And with that all out of the way, let's get into our conversation with Dave. We're talking about.
Yeah. So I was doing like drama and music and physics and religious studies at A level. I'd done it Welsh at AS level, but I dropped it. So I'm Welsh. And all of my family had done like A level Welsh and stuff. And, I was like, oh, what do I want to do? Do I want to do like philosophy? Because I really enjoy kind of philosophy and talking and thinking about kind of the world and our place in the world and the universe and stuff. And then I was sat there doing something for my AS level music, and it just hit me in the face. I was like, this is actually really cool if this is actually like how this works.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm going to do it because I'm just so curious about it. I ended up like applying to a bunch of different universities, as you do. I failed to get into Cambridge, as you do. But I'm really glad that I did, because I'd applied to one course in Bristol that was different to every other course. It was a music course, but it was like half a degree in music and then half a degree in it's a bit pretentious, but sorry, it's my beer's on the floor.
Pick it up.
Scoop it up. They call it innovation.
Okay.
So
okay.
It's slightly complicated. Yeah. So there are like 14 degrees that were all something with innovation, and we all kind of came together and solved problems and basically tried to save the world. Really cool. As a consequence, though, I did a music degree, but I now work like in the city in London. But that's because the other part of my degree, learning to solve problems and things, which is basically it's my nature to see a problem and go, well, that needs to be fixed, which is really interesting. Because that's basically how I LARP.
That's how you LARP.
I LARP by looking at things and going, these are problems that need solving, or by taking other skills of, you guys have expert knowledge in this. Come here. I need to know these facts from you. Thank you. I'm going to go off and shout at some other people now. Well, I don't shout at people. I did once shout. I have twice shouted at people, and both of them were in conclave.
So anyway, so you brought up LARP, and then we're recording, so we may as well get started. So did you have an awareness of LARP? Because I know I've spoken to you before, and you said you're like a baby LARPer like us, that because you started in 2022, right? Like us. Were you aware of LARP beforehand, or?
So yeah, I knew about it probably. God, I've known about it since like 2017, something like that. It was kind of on my radar. And I'm much younger than I look. Than when I started university in 2017. I was kind of disappointed that there was no LARP society, but I was like, fine, whatever. And then I was talking about it with a friend of mine, who was, I brought it up in conversation because we were talking about Dungeons and Dragons, and then it flows on as you do. It flows on. And he's like, oh, I LARP. I was like, oh, cool. I was like, have you heard of Empire? He's like, what's that? I'm like,
oh, okay.
And I'm like, oh, well, here, this is what it is. He's like, oh no, I don't do that. I was like, okay. He's like, I do a game called Vampire down in Bath. He's like, and it's all very like very political and kind of this is what's called a parlor LARP. And I was like, this sounds like absolute something I don't want to do. Sorry, I don't fancy vampires. It sounds boring. I want
popular system, but it's not
a popular system. But no, it just sounded to me, I was just like, this is not. I don't want pointy teeth and blood every. No, I'm out. Thanks. I'm checked out. And then 2020 came by, and I hadn't really talked to him that much I hadn't really talked to him that much at all in the intervening years for various reasons. And even though we were like on the same degree, he was a year older than me, so he was I didn't see him that much or whatever.
Yeah.
And he was like, "Oh, Dave, do you still want to do LARPing?" I was like, "Yeah." And he was like, "Oh, because I started going to Empire." I went, "Why didn't you tell me?"
Thanks.
I'm right here, right? And I was like, he's like, "Do you want to come this year?" I was like, "Yeah." I was like, "Cool." And so like a week later, he was coming to he wasn't in uni anymore. He'd finished, but he's coming back to Bristol. He was like, we'll do like your character creation and stuff and buy a ticket. I was like, yeah, super excited. So we did all this.
You said 2020, right?
In March 2020.
Okay. Oh, shit. Okay. Yep.
Yeah. So we did all this, like, yeah. And because we knew about the stuff that was going on, but cast it like right now we got so much awareness. But cast your mind back then, like we weren't wearing masks. We didn't know. Like I remember being in the library just like coughing and being like, "Oh, well, I hope no one gets COVID."
Yeah, we were planning on going to a convention. We had tickets to go to a convention in March, and till the week before, we were still going. You know, even when it was all kicking off.
Yeah. Sure, it'll just blow over. It'll be fine.
This is the thing. Like, and I bought my ticket, and I was like, yeah, it's gonna go. It's not gonna last too long because at the time we were comparing it to things like Ebola and swine flu, and we were like, oh, it's like it's not gonna last that long. Like, I actually thought this is hilarious. I was like, oh, I'm not gonna go home. Like, I'll just hunker down in my flat by myself because I was living with one other person. I was like, I've got 3 bottles of wine. That's enough. So I actually did go home. But then it all happened. I was like, oh crap. Well, I guess I'm not doing this for another 2 years.
I can't even imagine because
it was excruciating. But I still kind of like was holding out hope like the whole time, the whole year. And actually in like May, June, I started buying bits of kit and stuff, and so my very early Mercy kit, which I do have a photo of, but it's not great. It's interesting how it kind of develops. Anyway, later that year, we managed to have, because it got to a point like September, I think you're allowed 30 people outdoors. We had he has quite a bit of land, so he was able to host under 30 of us in our wider group that we're a part of. And we had it was a wonderful time. Like I met some people. I was in character. I was like, "This is really cool." So I actually managed to LARP.
You managed to get some
yeah.
Oh, that's
the
good,
problem was that was like, oh, here's the thing you really want to do, and I was like, yeah. And then the following year, it was like, you can't do any of it still.
So what was that little event like? Was it just a little bit of role play?
It was kind of purely social, like quite a bit of role play. I sung a couple of songs. The one that I do quite a lot, so the Tale of Dawn and the Dragon.
I'm familiar with it. Yeah,
premiered it there. Yeah, so I premiered the song there, and actually at the time it was a lot more complicated and it had a lot more intricacies to it. And then
more complicated.
Yeah. Then after the event, someone sent me a text saying, "Dave, right, it's great, I love it, but hit some advice. Don't do these things because it's going to make it easier for people to join in." And I was like, oh, I didn't even think people would want to join in.
Yeah, the chorus you got for that is quite it's catchy, you know.
Yeah,
that's what you want, and especially in like a social close situation like that where you're trying to get people engaged into your song. So you already had that written out. So from the beginning of the year, and then you were like, right, okay, so you were like right into the lore then, and was like, yeah, I'm writing songs for this and everything.
Well, okay, so little secret. Well, not secret. No
one will hear this. It's fine.
That song. So okay, so context. In Wales, we have this festival called the Eisteddfod. The Eisteddfod it's like a traditional festival of Welsh culture, and there's a national one, there's local ones, there's all sorts, and every school tends to do one around St. David's Day. And when I was like 12, my school was running one. But the first time ever, they were doing a proper crowning of the bard ceremony. Now, in the Eisteddfod, this is like the most pagan religious part of the whole thing. It's one of those kind of it's paganish druidic kind of things.
Right,
It's,
is
it's
that where
based
its
in,
roots come from? Is it? Yeah.
based in Druidic Celtic tradition?
Okay,
Yeah.
Okay.
Where basically it was recognizing that it recognizes that bards and poets and storytellers are actually more important than anyone because they keep us entertained in the dark hours of winter and stuff. And there's loads of great medieval, pre-medieval Welsh Celtic myths compiled in a book called the Mabinogion, which is it's really, really interesting because it kind of talks about these great like Welsh heroes that go up and down the country doing things and that, but all the guys that are like soldiers and stuff, they're also poets, and there's points where like they're deceiving people that they're actually just here as great bards, and they tell them stories, and then in the night they steal their horses, and then an entire kingdom goes up in arms because they stole their horses. But it's great fun. But anyway, so they have this crowning of the bard ceremony, and the bard is like the most reverend position, and to get the bard to become the bard, you have to write a poem.
Okay.
And so there was a big competition, and I wrote a poem. I'd not long read The Hobbit. So I wrote a poem about it was a vague poem. Obviously, I'm in Wales, so I can write poems about dragons, and no one's going to suspect a thing.
Nah.
Really, I wrote a poem about Lake Town, Dale, Erebor, and Smaug. But no one knows that, and it's fine. And I basically won the competition with this poem, and I'd written it in this kind of verse refrain format.
Yeah.
And the refrain was, they can hear it in the village, they can hear it in the town, that the mountain is the palace where the dragon wears its crown, which is the refrain from the song "The Tale of Dawn and the Dragon."
Yeah.
And I remember sitting down and reading the Dawn music brief and going, "Oh, like how do I do this? This is so like alien," because I'd been writing songs that year, but they were kind of in a pop style, kind of a bit like Tim Mitchell and stuff. I was like, how do I do this? I was like, I know, I've got that poem. I tried if I could to find the whole poem, but all I could remember from it was that one line. So I knew I had this. I knew I had this line, and then this is going to sound quite pretentious again, but I live on in Wales. I live on the side of a mountain, and I can walk to the top of that mountain, and it's quite ethereal, quite like nice, particularly if it's foggy. It's a great walk, but a really good place to kind of find your muse. And I was basically, I knew I had this in my head. I was like, how do I turn this into a song? What's the story here? We know kind of what happens. We know some people go and there's a dragon that's terrorizing people, and we know that they kill it. I was like, that's what we know. And I just remember walking up the mountain, and I started humming this tune. I was going bum ba-dum 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 bum ba-dum. That's quite good actually. Hang on. And then I remember I was like on top of the mountain. I was like, I got to write this down. Oh, I got to go write this down. And I was like speeding down the hill, just like singing this song to myself, just going bum ba-dum 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 ba. And that's kind of where it birthed from. And it took me a long time to write that song. I'd written the first kind of 2-3 verses, and I shelved it. 3 months later, the week before this 30-person player event, I'm sat there going, I'm the one bard I know that's turning up to this event, and I know that my Earl is going to want me to sing.
Because bards are the most important.
Yeah. I better write this damned song. So I like blitzed it through, and I was living with a composer, and I sang to him, actually, this is pretty good. I really enjoy this. So that's kind of where the song was birthed. It was
to premiere it at the
at that player event, and then nothing for a whole year, and I was devastated, as you can well imagine.
Yeah, because it got worse, didn't it? Like the end of 2020.
Oh yeah, that's when Delta ripped through everything. Yeah,
it got worse, and then they like shut down Christmas again or something, didn't they?
Yeah. I then moved back, so I was back then in Bristol by that point. And then December 2020, we got like shipped out like in batches. They had to ship us out at home in batches so we didn't like swarm public transport. It was a whole operation. And I was home then in Wales for like 4 months. And to be honest, I put LARP out of my mind because I was like, this just isn't happening this year. Like, it's not. I'm not that engaged with it. You know, when it comes, it'll come and it'll be great. But fine. Anyway, the year goes on, and events get cancelled. I'm like, okay, well, we knew this was going to happen. It kind of sucks. And then the September event got cancelled. The autumn event got cancelled.
And
it was the one that 2021. And everyone was hoping that they'd managed to do it by that point. Because the numbers were looking good. The health and safety was kind of looking good. We were good to go. And then July happened. And there was a spike in July. And the numbers stopped looking so good. And the health and safety stopped looking so good. And so they cancelled it. And then immediately 5-player events happened that weekend in different places because it basically exploded. Crazy. And my Earl was going to one. He's like, I am going to this event. I was like, oh, like, it looks quite combat heavy. I'm not really combat character. He's like, come along. Like, some of the people you've already met are going to be there. You don't necessarily have to fight. Like, we can lend you weapons. We know you don't have anything. We can lend you armor and stuff. Just come. And it was like 130-player event in some fields just outside Birmingham. And it was like a microcosm of Anvil because there were camps from every nation that separated themselves from each other.
As you do,
there was a bard that everyone was singing in. There was a dedicated songs and stories circle.
Ooh,
which was really fun because I basically I was like, oh, I've heard you need bards or whatever. He's like, yeah, please come along. And I was like, oh, can I just do you mind if I just leave my guitar there? He's like, yeah, no, that's fine. I'm not starting for another 20 minutes. It's like, cool. I've got to go talk to someone about something because by that point I'd been embroiled in plot.
You had.
Hello. Look, plot finds me, okay? I don't go looking for this shit. It just comes into my life and I've got to deal with it. And I went off, found some people, had some conversations. By the time I started hearing drums, I was like, oh, I gotta go. I told this guy's gonna be there to sing some songs. By that point, I had quite a few more songs as well. And I rocked up, and the circle was full of people. And this guy was like, there's our bard. And I was like, huh? You've been waiting for me? I'm like a little babby player. I'm like, I don't know what's sure, hi. And I realized that it was him. There was another guy to his left, and there was an empty chair to his right. And they were the 3 seats of honor. And I was like, I'm one of the.
You can sell the tickets to this thing, yeah.
I'm one of the important people here. You've just given me a position of honor, and I'm not even in your nation. Thanks for all that trust you put in me. But it was really great fun, and I, for the first time, really understood what it meant to kind of be in that atmosphere and people singing and just watching everything and just being in awe of what's going on. And the most amazing moment was someone was telling a story and then they forgot their words halfway through, so they went off to kind of do something, and the Navari next to me, he started vocalizing. He just started singing some random tunes and stuff, and I've got a music degree and I know what I'm doing, so I just started singing too and harmonizing with him. And we didn't know each other. We'd never met. We weren't having eye contact. We were just listening to each other. And we managed to basically make this gorgeous, long piece of music completely improvised. And he turns to me and goes, are you sure you're not Navari? I went, no, I'm just well trained.
Just well trained.
But Mercy did that. That's not Dave. But Mercy is very, very, very well. At the time, was very much fresh out of hole. Well, he wasn't fresh out of hole, but at all. He's fresh off the bloody ditch that my lord constantly reminds people that he pulled him from. There's somewhat in a joking manner. He goes, whenever I perform well and people are like, he's incredible, they turn to him and they go, and he goes, found him in a ditch. Yeah, but then, because that's the story, right? The story is very much stolen from A Knight's Tale. Very much had nothing but the jacket on his back.
Great film.
Brilliant film. Nothing on the jacket with his back. Wakes up, there's this man reaching down to him, and he takes him under his wing, and now there's a Mercy you see today. But yeah, that's kind of how I got introduced to LARP, and then that that November, October, I went to another smaller event, met some people. That's where I met my late orc friend, and then I went to an event in Bath, History and Virtue.
Oh yeah,
which was really good, really good fun. Met lots of people there. Met lots of very interesting people there, and then obviously we're in 2022 and you can LARP in a big field again.
Yeah, so I mean, it sounded like it was everything you hoped it would be. Was it what you expected it to be? Because I tell people LARPing wasn't what I expected in like the best way possible. I was like, what is this going to be like? Is it? Yeah. And then you get there and it's just so much better than you expect.
Do you know what? There's our community. I mean, when I say our community, I mean the wider nerd community. Is full of lots of very eclectic people, and I've come from a background of theatre. So I've come from a background of people embodying characters, people being very eccentric, very switched on, and I was very much aware that 3,000 players in a field is a lot of people.
Yeah.
And I've got a lot of experience. And I was like, am I going to stick out like a sore thumb? Or am I going to fit in? There's something that Matt P said on the podcast he did with you guys. It really stuck with me. He said, every human being knows how to role play innately. There is no hard skill. And to be honest, like up to a point, and that point being big, overly dramatic scenes, and well, it's quite a lot of being Dornish then, basically. But like, and knowing, and sometimes knowing what to say and or how to say it, or talking in front of big crowds, for example, and performing like I do. Everyone does it. You don't notice. There is none of that apprehension that you expect there to be.
No,
and it's absolutely crazy because I remember coming away from that first event. And I mean, I couldn't talk for one because I lost my voice.
Yeah, you do.
But yeah, but I remember for the first couple of days, I had culture shock coming back into normal life.
Oh, this is a real thing, but I don't think we've ever mentioned this on the podcast. Stopping at the service station on your way back from Anvil is a weird thing because you like seeing people in modern clothing and not wearing swords, and you're like, okay, it's a bit of and people just obviously just ignoring you because they're motorway strangers, even
that's getting weird. In the car is strange, right? Because your brain doesn't really know what it's doing anymore because funnily enough, it's been living a slow life like we were intended to be living, not this hyper fast-paced whatever world we live in. And it's suddenly like, oh, you've got to go 30 times faster than we were. I didn't know this. Oh, we're doing okay. This is what we're doing now. But it takes a couple of days.
Yeah.
And you know what? Those are the worst days in the world because you're sat there going, oh, it's so much better living in fantasy medieval times. Ignore the fact that, and I specifically say fantasy medieval times. If we lived in actual medieval times, we'd all have dysentery and like we'd all be oppressed and poor.
Wait, hang on. Anesthetic
wait, hang on. Without being too political, but
that's where people would probably get value out of it, right? Because there's a lot of people in this world that shun technology and like, oh yeah, it was better when I think they would get a real kick out of LARPing, and
things were better when I was younger.
Exactly. Those type of people I think would have a great time LARPing because that's probably as close as you're going to get. But like you said, I mean, that's why someone like the Bard. I think people, because I know with the big popularity spike in D&D 5th edition, like I know when that 5th edition first came out, the Bard was like the jokey class, and then it became the most popular class,
It's the most popular class. But it's the most popular class because it's the most overpowered. Because it has expertise, it has it can steal spells from other spell lists, and if you want to like optimize the play of that character, you can just be like, oh, well, I can do this and this and this and this, and honestly, you can have endless fun with Buzz. I know we're talking about LARP, but to tangent away for a while until it is related to LARP.
It
It
is
is absolutely devastating, and I'll explain why it's related to LARP now. Directly related. So, the game I play online with some old mates from school. And if one player is missing, we still tend to run because there's enough of us to run it anyway.
Yeah.
And that player just kind of gets the character. If we're in combat, gets played by someone else. If not, otherwise they're just strangely silent. I got in the car after E2, and was after E2, after E3. No, I wasn't driving. I got in the car after E3.
Yeah.
And I sit down, I unlock my phone, and I scroll back through the messages. Oh no, that's not it, because we play on a Sunday night. It was on the way home.
On the way home. Yeah.
I got home. I opened my phone. Read through my messages. Like, oh, Charlie's died. I was like, oh yeah, nice one, guys. That's very funny. I love it. The banter. They were like, no, Charlie's dead. I was like, what? They were like, yeah, we almost had a TPK. I'm like, I'm sorry. He's like, yeah, he wasn't the only one that died either. I went, you killed my character while I was out in a field LARPing as a bard.
That's not cool. That's not cool. Come on.
Not cool. But he was fun. It was a creation bard, and I basically kind of it was a little bit jokey, but I basically did as much summoning as possible. So I had like a giant statue. I had animate objects. I had like 10 knives flying around, and it's really cool. But it's really, really good, and it is. The thing is, people often bounce from like Dungeons and Dragons to LARP, and you kind of still want to do both. And it's not a case of you want to do both because you still want to be living in, you still want to have that fantasy escape. Yes, there is that.
Yeah.
For me, you kind of still want to do both because magic in LARP is an interesting experience and very different and very difficult to do. Magic in D&D is batshit crazy.
Oh yeah,
and
high fantasy,
so fun to do. It's high fantasy. It's like power fantasy. It's wonderful. And actually, just that idea that you can manipulate a world and a story with that much power, it is something that you will never get in a LARP system. Yes, you can manipulate stories. That yes, you can do some quite heroic things, but you won't ever get the same experience that you actually do in D&D, not least because unless you can pick up a horse and use it to bludgeon someone, sorry, you can't play a Goliath barbarian that can pick up a horse and bludgeon someone. Yes, I have that as a prepared character. If my current character dies, it will be my 4th character that's died in this campaign. I will re-roll as a barbarian that uses a horse as a weapon, and my DM better be happy with it. That's it. That's my piece.
Yeah, but I think it's a different type of fantasy, though, is it? And I'm saying fantasy not as in a genre, as in a human fantasy, because in D&D you can be like the Avengers, but the problem is you're like 5 or 6 people in a world full of however many your DM decides to put in there, and you can literally change the entire world unfairly. Whereas when you're LARPing, having one person having the power to change the world with like a silly spell or something and just ruin everyone else's weekend. It just wouldn't work. I mean,
it's why high magnitude rituals have just had their magnitude increased. It's why arcane projections are so difficult to get right. Because the magic to completely change the world, the ritual magic to completely change the world is there. It exists. It's been used in some way, shape, or form before.
Yeah.
But you've got to do a lot of actual people work to get there. Like the big famous one recently, well, there are 2. One is the curse. Well, I think it's a curse. The rivers run red. Which has been interdicted by Conclave.
Tell us
about that, because I heard lots of people talking about that, and I have no idea what happened, how it happened, why it happened.
Right, so I can't tell you too much about that. This is the lovely moment where you perceive me in the field as someone that's very knowledgeable about magic and very knowledgeable about a lot of things. I know absolutely nothing. I'm just good at talking to people. There are other people that I know that are the walking wikis, walking encyclopedias. But what I can tell you is basically, like, I think it murders a lot of people in a given area. It's not good. It's not fun, and apparently not particularly virtuous in some people's mind's eye. But that affects like an entire territory, and if you're in that territory, you're based in that territory, like people are going to die. Like, not necessarily in the field, but people that you see every day And that's devastating. I think that is one thing, because it's slightly below the abstraction layer in terms of day-to-day NPCs. Slightly below the abstraction layer, you forget that there are other normal people in your character's normal life, like just villagers and people that they have relationships with, that means something to them, that would be impacted by those decisions. And I think a lot of the times when you see ritualists making decisions, when you see synod making decisions, when you see senate, and when you see the big four bodies making decisions, right? When you see all four bodies making decisions, a lot of it for people comes down to the fact, like, you can't run away from the fact that it is a game. And because it's a game, it has numbers and it has mechanics, and it runs as a game and it works as a game. And because LARP is full of very smart people, there are a lot of people that can game the system very well.
Not just people like me. It's got smart people too.
You're my favorite kind of player because you don't. But as a result, and this happens a lot in Dungeons and Dragons as well. As a result, people play with mechanics first and then role play second. The problem is with LARP is because you're in character, it's very easy to make it look like the role play is coming first and the maths is coming second. But there are people in LARP that want to win. And as a consequence, and they think that they're going to win the big game by making the big moves, but as a consequence, when people make big decisions, not that I've necessarily been around too many people, but there doesn't seem to be. I've never really heard anyone say, and maybe this is something, a wish for the future of Empire, of more people kind of being like, but what about the villagers? What about our people? What about what about Ken Bloggs the butcher? And his kid that's got a broken leg. We're gonna need that money. We're gonna need that mana. And there was actually a really good one. When there was like flooding in a mine, and there was really good kind of fluff text in the Wind of Fortune, and I was like, oh, that's really good. And I heard some people genuinely talking about people that they knew. I was like, this is great. But I think because we're like the 1%, we kind of lose some of that. And I think it would be good if you had more of that. But for me, it's really important. So to kind of remembering those things. The other ritual, but just before I forget, I don't actually know what the ritual was, but it was the one that caused all the rain during the summer. No, not all the rain, the drought. It was the one that caused the drought, followed by the one that caused the rain.
You'd think they would cancel each other out.
Yeah.
Is this really a problem?
It was for 3 months, and then it was a different problem for another 3 months. Right now, we're just in the middle of winter. But actually, this kind of, to follow on, like something that I did, going back to kind of my beginnings of LARP and stuff, I started getting involved in various Discord servers. I'm sure it's a story you've heard time and time again. And something I noticed this year for the first time, I say this year, I mean last year, was people writing fiction in downtime about what their characters were doing. I'm like, oh, okay, well, let's do a little bit of this. I've got permission to talk about this. Or part of this anyway.
The good part.
I said, her words were, "You can, but like, be kind of vague, or like, don't say too much." I'm like, okay, fine.
What kind of fan fiction is this?
I have the power of editing.
Should we put a disclaimer up now, or?
I got beer on my nose. No. I've made it sound worse than it is. Are you familiar with the concept of Ballgowning?
No,
not as a term.
Cool, because you guys do it. You just don't know that.
Okay.
You guys do it really well. I know you guys do it really well because I had a chat for an hour with Oliver in my tent about it. It was all that related. So when was that? That was E4. Was that that was E4? E3 we had.
No, it was E4.
It was E4 we had that conversation.
E4.
Yeah. I'm just trying to work out the real world timelines in my head as well because reasons. So I started, so me and Mercy started, Mercy started being very cheeky in some letters with a Dornish enchantress called Enchantress Olivia Sepulchre. And this started actually after E1. And it was really interesting. We kind of like sent letters back and forth. And he was being a very cheeky chappy, and she was very much like, "Excuse me, do you know who you're talking to?" And it's like, "Yeah, I know exactly who I'm talking to," but in letter form.
Yes.
And then after at E2, kind of E2 was the flower event with the flower festival with the different codes and flowers and stuff as well. You understand? And I was like, oh, I can be really funny and clever with this, and so I was really funny and clever with this, and rightly so. It kind of annoyed her in exactly the right way, exactly the way he wanted to. Ended up having a really good conversation, and so I was like, cool. Wrote her a letter after that, and it kind of went on a little bit, and I met you guys at E3 properly with my orc head.
That's right.
Do you remember that?
I vividly remember the orc head.
Yeah. Okay, so we kind of sent. It was like one set of letters, another set of letters, and then I had a text saying, basically saying, "Oh, check the post." I was like, "Oh, you only got my letter yesterday." She was like, "Yep." Yeah, I was like, "The hell have you sent back?" And I opened this envelope. There was one thing in there, and the one thing that was in there, oh no, it wasn't that. It wasn't that. It was before that. Wait, was it before that? I'm trying to. No, yeah. I sent at the end of the letter, the letter previous. Mercy said, "Oh, send me back an orc's head, something to do with proving her might."
Yeah,
it was hilarious and absolutely like shooting for the moon. Bring me back an orc's head, and then she like fully sent an orc's head. And I opened this envelope, and there was this piece. It was like OC note. You receive that, you kind of get this box and it's got this smell. I was like, oh, that's quite interesting. That's kind of like fiction. I was like, okay. So in response, I had Mercy send her the head of I think it was a wyvern or there was a mandowler, a head of a mandowler in like a pretty box or whatever. But
what's a mandowler?
It's like a giant bear. It's like an owl bear. But because that's trademarked. So yes, he had him kind of send this back. I heard that. It's very topical. Very topical. We're not breaking into that discussion.
At the time of recording.
At the time of recording, we're not sure what Wizards of the Coast are doing. We didn't like what they were doing before. We're at least happy that they've backtracked somewhat, but who knows?
It's fine. Who knows when this episode is released? We both love and don't condone D&D. I don't know.
Yes, that.
Just see, like D&D gets cancelled, and you remove every single reference to Dungeons and Dragons in your back catalogue. No,
all
the podcast goes offline. No, anyway, so I was like, oh yeah, okay, and that's the moment I discovered that I was writing fiction, and I didn't really realize it.
Yeah.
And so I wrote down the kind of background of what happens. I was like, okay, so my courier, Arianwen, who's a Navari, and I described this like Amazonian 6-foot-tall woman with 2 spears on her back and like covered in knives and stuff, something that I could never physically portray like on the field, and something that I don't ever physically portray on the field, so that I can use her and manipulate her in the background. Effectively as she does this, she goes off and does this, and she travels around or whatever. Like, I can use her as a plot device for me in the background in delivering letters and stuff and building relationships. And then I could talk about her in the field, and then I could talk about her to other people, and I suddenly do. And I actually get kind of at the time as well, like started like co-writing a fiction with someone else. And I was like, this is kind of strange, but it's like role-playing my character, but online. But okay, well, I guess we're going with this. And I created some more characters. And I'll get kind of all the way through to the end of this. God, then I was like, do you know what? Like, I'm not done yet. Like he needs to. He'd had received in his letters words to the effect of, "You need to prove yourself."
Yeah.
And so I was
it's
like, cool.
like in because I think we heard up until this point because for listeners, we heard this story in character from Mercy. You actually had the orc's head there in the tavern, right?
Yeah.
And I think we heard up until this point.
Yeah,
this is where we were left off with you, because you like told us all this, and it was very, after the many beers in the tavern, and then you said, this is to be continued. This isn't being continued for us.
I
got a little bit at E4, but
he did. So the kind of you need to prove yourself thing was a whole thing. And so I was like, how am I going to show her that he needs to prove himself? He needs to go find himself. You had this whole thing about death, and we'd had this whole conversation. So I wrote this fiction about him facing his demons, him going back to Holberg and facing his past. And it was the most actualizing thing for me, because I was like, actually, I feel like he's a real person who's gone off and done stuff. I know what he's done between events now, and I know the people he's met. And there are now half a dozen or so NPCs that I have personal ties to, that if something happened in Holberg, I'd be straight in Holberg making sure that the people that I know there are being looked after. And then and I'll get to kind of the end of the story a little bit, and I'll get back to the story about what happened with the kind of Ballgowning in a sec. But all of these NPCs kind of in the background, and then as some consequences of what became of this Ballgowning plot, at the fourth event, I was like, cool. Downtime was just about to happen. I was like, screw it. Mercy's ditching the manor site, and he's getting a military unit, and he's going off to Zenith to fight. To back the Eastern Sky, because Mercy's got a really good relationship with the general, to fight for a good friend in Urizen. Like, he's gonna go off and do it. I was like, but what's Mercy's military unit made of? Because it doesn't make sense that he's just got like a bog standard load of people marching. I was like, that's not very Mercy. It was like, Mercy's got mercenaries. Mercy has mercenaries.
Yeah.
So Mercy's mercenaries, which is what the unit is genuinely called, is made up of Arianwin, his courier, who's Navari, three random questing knights that I wrote in backstory that came and hunted the Mandala with me. Then two mages who used to run. They used to be bookkeepers at a fighting ring that I wrote about. The champion of that fighting ring, the bodyguard of that fighting ring. That's it. That's my military unit. And I've written it as basically like a specialized force that will, like, task force, because they're a bunch of specialists that will go off and like target certain points in the battlefield and kind of be used like that, while Mercy's off doing something actually useful. I was like, I've actually got this thing, and I like posted it to the wiki, and the guy that not the wiki, the Dawn page, and the guy that looks after that kind of military unit thing was like, this is really cool. And I'm like, I know, right? Because it actually makes me feel like that's it. That's the thing that's happened, and there is a story of kind of what's going on. There is a continuation in my head of where a version, a part of me that lives and exists is now, which is why I'm now looking. I've got some design stuff open on my computer. I'm now looking at designing a new kind of garment for Mercy to wear that's kind of slightly more military. So it kind of has that more of a military presence when I get back to Anvil. But to finish the story, basically what happened was we decided, actually out of character, that it wasn't really a kind of going anywhere particularly useful, but kind of we kind of wanted to make sure that was decided out of character, particularly because I know that the character had another Ballgowning plot going on with someone else, and had been going for quite a long time, and they were supposedly betrothed. Which is a thing, and there was a whole part of, I'm gonna fight for you, I'm better than she is, blah 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 blah. And we decided out of character that actually, we knew where we wanted that story to go. And we wanted it to go in favor of her and the other. So on that pilgrimage to Holberg, I wrote that. On that pilgrimage to Holberg, I basically realized that he'd found his true love, and she was in Holberg, and she died during the siege. And so actually, finding love is not that important to him anymore, because he's already found it. He's just going to find her again. And I made that decision and had a very quick conversation in character with Olivia. Knew what was going on. However, we hadn't informed her other half about this. Her icy other half about this. And she'd, just before the event happened, just before the event started, she sent me a small letter that said the name of a tea house and a date and a time. And I was like, oh, I'm gonna get killed. So I girded. Like, I wasn't fully girded. I was wearing some armor.
Yeah.
And I rocked up to this tea house, and I had a very, very interesting conversation with her other half, which went all the way from "What do you mean you're not in love with her anymore?" to "No, I think you two need to give this a shot," and said her as any giving Mercy a handshake, which is really really important.
Big deal.
Touching for his I was like, okay, this is big. Anyway, long and short, to kind of really tie that whole story to a close, what ended up happening was ended up dying on the Sunday, in the Sunday battle. She was she said she died, and she told Mercy to go and find her betrothed. And found her in the same tea shop, and she came out and she's like, oh, what's wrong? She's like, come on, you're joking. I was like, no. She's like, no, this is just some cool trick, Mercy. And I was like, she's dying. And she would like clasped my hand. She was gone. It was the most powerful, emotional moment. Like, it was real. I was there. Yeah. And I took her back to Dawn, and along with another priest from Wintermark, married them. I said to her on the battlefield, I said, there won't be a funeral today, there will be a wedding. And there was, and they married, and she died. And it was heartbreaking. And that's the end of that part of that story. And now there is the aftermath to deal with. That's kind of why I was in Urizen and so on.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a whole wonderful world, really.
There's nothing wrong with that type of role play, because you were talking about like obviously having an out of character, because we did similar things, and I was almost worried that people were not gonna be into this, because obviously we had our test of metal, but we had
so many people
we orchestrated we orchestrated parts of it, obviously, but not other parts. but like you said, of not telling people. So obviously we were like, this is kind of where we want it to go. This is kind of the direction that we want to sail to. So for example, like we've literally been up front with this, like on the podcast after the fact, we had 10 nations to go to and get stories, and we were competing with each other. But before E3, we were like, okay, so where would you be more comfortable going? There's no point in us both going that way. Okay, I'll take the league, and because what game would you like the most? And I think, I'd like to go to the bar, that kind of thing. But then we didn't tell certain people, so we would get just a reaction, and then you'd feed off that role play, like because at the end, obviously we kind of knew that Robin was going to forfeit her last story to Godric, but we didn't tell the Earl of the house, so we didn't tell anyone else. So then we could get that. I mean, you don't want to orchestrate too much, because you might be disappointed.
Yeah.
But if you're willing to if you're willing to orchestrate something, then dive in, because I'm sure that you had. Yeah. You went, right, this is the way we want to go. Yeah. But you, like Dave, you had no idea that's where it was going to end up. You bring the Urizeni to Dawn
to that wedding, and actually the decision to be like, I'm going to marry you now, was very, very like on the spot. Bear in mind, like in in that battle, I was actually girded as someone that was already terminal. I was like in the command block. I was in the command block and running. I was trapped inside my gorget, which I've now discovered. It showed me that my back is not the way my back is supposed to be. I was like very hot on that Sunday. And I just like very much snap decision. Adrenaline was running. I was like, I'm going to do this. This is what I'm going to do. Because like it's one of those things. So the company's called Profound Decisions, and you do make and take profound decisions which affect the course of the game and roleplay and stuff. But actually, you as a player take some profound decisions with the things that you are going to be doing, the thing that kind of being big and brash. At the God, I hate this story. I hate this story because
but you're gonna tell anyway.
Makes me look like a cock. Well, it makes Mercy look like a cock, which is fine because he is. But basically, at E1, there was a contest for one of the Archmage positions, and I was helping the incumbent Archmage to remain in their seat, and it was basically, for me, it was like by any means possible. And I went down one avenue, no dice, went down another avenue, no dice, like to try and find things to say to back them up in Conclave, because Conclave works very weirdly. I actually knew the person that was kind of contesting them, and I had a conversation with them about kind of the contest and being very sly. And I got a really interesting piece of information from them. Not a piece of information. It was very, very much off the record conversation caught on the record by a certain tabloid newspaper, and is published as an exclusive article in this week's Sunday paper. I got one of those kind of moments, and I rocked up in Conclave, and I just went. I thought, oh, okay, well, I've got other options, but I need to make sure that he doesn't get this position of power. Dave, I'm taking the decision to potentially have to make some reparations and have some difficult game coming in the future. Let's go and say, did you or did you not say this about what you would do with the position? And the whole of Conclave went,
oh, that is a
audible gasp, and I was like, yeah, that was incredible. I love that. Can I do that again, please?
That is a LARP bucket list thing to do as well, is to stand up and say something in a court or something, and everyone would be like,
such a power move, just going in. And I heard a few people doing that recently, and it's just like,
as a consequence, though, I then kind of bonded with that Archmage, and they invited me to do some things, and I made some friends, I made some enemies. I made more enemies than I made friends. No, actually I didn't. I temporarily made quite a lot of enemies, and then over the course of the next 3 events, I made amends, mostly because I wrote a song about that entire group, and I played it for them, and they were like, okay, that's incredible. And I was like, thanks. They were like, yeah, you're forgiven. All apart from one, their Seneschal was really, really pissed off at me, or Mercy, about what he'd done. And then at E4, I think it was E3, because we were both in shirts, because you weren't doing anything other than wearing just a shirt at E3. It was too hot.
Yeah.
I was like, can I have a word with you? And basically, we went into the Glory Square. We had a DMC about loyalty. He got some stuff off his chest. I got some stuff off his chest. We hugged. I gave him a favor, and now we're squared. It was great. Because the reason we did it is because partly the reason we did it is because the player and IOC were very much like, probably was like, I just want to like listen to you sing your songs and not hate you while I'm doing it. I'm like, yeah, okay.
I was picturing them sitting there being like, oh, he's singing again.
Yeah,
okay, he's singing
again. Yeah. Literally, like he would do that. It was honestly so devastating. So like, yeah, we'll fix that. But it's funny really how this works, because it's points like that where you're like, where you can sit there and go, yeah, it's just a game. And really, if you want to change it, like if something goes wrong and it really impacts you, it bleeds through, it really impacts you out of character, you can just take a step back and go, this is just a game. Can we treat it as a game? And these things didn't happen, and let's not bring some of that tension, because like I've had some moments where some of that tension really has appeared, and I've been like, well, I don't want to deal with this, and kind of mentioned it, and people have been like, cool, like fine, we'll back off. And I think it's really good, and they've got a really good kind of system that there is that social contract of hey guys, what, you're in a game? Yeah, thank you for reminding me I'm in a game.
Yeah, but I do want to ask you about like bleed, because obviously it's something that happens in like D&D and things like that. And I know you said you went to you got a music degree, but you said you had a theater background. Like a lot of people that do LARP and D&D, you know, they're not when you assuming, you know, when you're training to act, you're putting yourself in these positions, you're putting yourself in these emotions and going, right, okay, and sometimes that can be unpleasant. And a lot of people that sit around the table playing D&D and people that go LARPing, they either don't realize they're signing up for it, or they just haven't signed up for it, and then they put in these situations, you know. And I know in the TTRPG community, there's been a big push with like safety tools and being like, okay, what's everyone okay with? Yeah. Because sometimes people are just, they don't realize that they can't, what's going to happen if you go, okay, I'm going to give you a load of things that you're attached to, and now you come to your home village, it's all burned down, and they're like, wait, what? And they've never like purposely, like I'm assuming you would do, you know, if I've done a little bit of acting, but it's like you're purposely putting you're signing up for it. You're like, I'm going to purposely put my go there. And the weird thing about bleed is that it's some people obviously enjoy that type of thing. You know, that's what like
it's known as type 2 fun. It's not fun while you're doing it. Afterwards you go, that was freaking awesome, man.
So what would you like, what would your advice be to people like going through that? Because I always find this difficult, because sometimes like you say, in the moment it's emotional, or you're like, okay, this is a sad moment, especially with dealing with character depth, or even like moments with like the Godric and Mercy had, you know. And we were talking, because you're talking about because obviously you've already said it, you knew your true love, and then you would meet again, and that's kind of that's where Mercy and Godric came together, because he was like, oh well, because he was having this crisis of shit, you know, one day I don't have a story of true love, I'm in the middle of a story, and it's going to end, you know, one way or another, it is going to end. And he was having that crisis, and I had that kind of bleed, because because
I can't do this.
because I mean, that's a real life thing, you know, especially when I'm role playing with my actual wife as well. But I enjoyed it,
because I remember you were like, we dropped to get a character for a minute, and you were like, thing is, right, like, that's my wife, but like, that's my wife, man. Like, that's my wife out there, like, getting panel beaten by people. I can't do shit about it. It's my wife.
I can't be protective and be like, oh yeah, you know, I can't. You gotta let her be her without. I'm being protective because, you know, I don't want, you know, it could end, you know, at any moment in roleplay. You know, if Aranel dies.
Right.
I feel every time you go charging up into a Druge line without even looking over your bloody shoulder.
But why in this context? Why in this context in my head? Sorry, it's hilarious. In my head right now, Robin is Mr. Freeze from The Incredibles, and you're his wife. And she's going, honey, where is my chainmail? Darling, you are my wife.
My wife. But you know, but again, like, out of character,
very accurate, actually.
Out of character, I didn't expect Robin to actually role play as a character like that either. You know, So which was where the kind of that little bit of bleed was coming from as well. Yeah. But it's what would you like? Do you? Because like you said, you especially when you're doing through Discord. Now I know it's quite easy to. It's surprisingly easy, actually. If you're having a role play with someone, people are very easy to find online, aren't they? And you can. I had an orc player that we had a little bit of like tense competitive role play, and they actually messaged me, and this was amazing. Messaged me and was like, "Hey,
was this cool?
That interaction we had? You know, it was. I had fun. Do you want more of it, or do you want less of it?" And that's so easy to do.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It's that sort of consent thing, that safety tool that you are bringing into a system, and that's a way of doing it, and just making sure everyone is comfortable and happy.
So with talking about bleed, actually, what's you never explained Ballgowning. I feel like I know what it is now that you've told that story.
Right, I'll start with Ballgowning first. So Ballgowning is one of those terms that's been reclaimed. So in the early days, my understanding of it, and it is a little bit primitive, and people can shout at me in comments or whatever and say I'm wrong, but my understanding of it is, in the early days of LARP, it was very much very much a boys' club, more than it was a girls' club. Not very inclusive. Very much men wanting to slap each other with swords and be the big hero, the big I am, and do fighting and be gritty and adventure-y.
Yeah.
And then women started going, but I want to wear a nice pretty dress and come and LARP with you too. And so they came along and fine. And then they were like, but I want to do dancing and be romantic and all sorts of things. And the big burly men started going, oh, like, why are you doing such like light LARP? Why are you ball gowning with each other? And they basically started like saying that there was a better kind of LARP, which is the more gamey LARP, and then there is a softer kind of more role-playing, story-driven side of like, in my view, that is, frankly, Ballgowning encompasses quite a lot more, because it's not just romantic relationships now, it's platonic relationships, it's those connections, those really deep connections that you form with people because you get really immersed. And it's a term that's now been reclaimed by people that do it quite a lot, because it's like, yeah, we are, and it's great fun, and everybody loves it. Because everyone knows, if you're reading a fantasy fiction novel, you better mind there's at least one romantic plot arc in it. If not, you can strip the whole book back and it's all about romance. Basically, all books are fundamentally. So Ballgowning and LARP really, generally, if you say it to someone, what it will mean is you're role playing an in character romantic relationship with someone else, and this really kind of feeds into the whole conversation that we've been having around consent and around boundaries and so on, because the way it should work at a very, very base level is, if you're getting on with a character, whatever, and either one of you decides, actually, I think it'd be really interesting if these two characters, and there's an important distinction here, right? It's generally about players making decisions about the stories that their characters should follow. There is, it can often be misconstrued that, because that is the case, that you also want to follow through romantically out of character. I don't know what the stats are on this, but my experience is, by and large, that's not the case. By and large, people just want to play silly fantasy characters that have romantic dramas with each other, and don't in any way, shape, or form, most people don't engage physically.
Because like you said, it's good. It's an important storytelling, important storytelling point,
really
isn't it?
And so what happened in my case, or what has happened, what I've done in things that I've done before is, I'll just send someone a message or be like, what do you think about doing this? They'll be like, yes, I like this idea, or no, I don't. I don't want to have that kind of game. And you're like, absolutely fine, no worries at all. If they're like, yeah, let's do this. This actually sounds really cool, it'll be really interesting for the story. You go, cool, like, what are your boundaries in terms of physical touch, subjects to avoid, whether you want to kind of be perceived in a sexual way, or what kind of and so on. Oh god, sorry, I had COVID a few weeks ago, and it just comes back.
Oh no, yeah. Need that troubadour's tonic.
Yeah.
I'll send you some.
Send me some. So
just tea.
it's just tea. Dave, what? It's just tea. I don't care. It's great. Anyway, so you have this kind of conversation about boundaries. You're like, cool, go. Let's kind of see where this goes, see what happens. And it's really, really kind of good practice. And this is kind of, I'm now melding the answer to two questions: what is Ballgowning and what is your advice, right? Because it's really, really good practice to have to regularly check in with the people that you're ballgowning with. And when I say regularly check in, I mean, like, how do you think this is going? Yeah. Are there any boundaries you want to change? You know, whether that's you kind of want to open up more boundaries, or you want to kind of tighten things, or like, do you want to stop doing this and we can work some way out kind of in the background? That's the really real advantage of there being, you know, three months in game time between events. 3 months is a long time for a himbo bar to find someone else to romance. When the whole of dawn is
there's loads of fish in that sea.
I mean, Astalat's a wide place.
Yes.
But yeah, and you can kind of go, okay, what do you need to change? What wasn't working? And by doing that, you're having this constant conversation, and you kind of make a social contract. But it's really important to kind of make it explicit and go, look, if at any time anything isn't working, just like put your hand in the air, drop out a character. It's totally fine. And it's almost kind of like expected that might happen at some point. In my experiences, though, like, I've been comfortable enough with the people I've been ballgowning with that dropping out of character and putting, I don't need to put my hand in the air, because we can tell when we're just talking as us or when we're just talking as our characters. Because we talk in different ways, or particularly certain people talk in very different ways at me, or Mercy, I should say. So that's kind of like that gives an overview of what ballgowning is, which is kind of why I was saying what you and Robin are doing is ballgowning, because even though you are actually married, by dint of the fact that your characters have an in-character relationship, and you have like in-character worries and concerns and emotions between the characters, and it's strange, I guess, because, you know, I'll go on to the question really about bleed as well. But you guys have an interesting case of bleed, right? Because your bleed is this is my wife, and I have all the emotions for her that I have for her as my wife, but she's also my betrothed in character, and how do I deal with that? God knows. No, it's the real answer.
It's a weird one as well, though, because I see Arnell and Godric's relationship very different from mine and Oliver's relationship.
Functional.
And then...
I'm not commenting on that. Nope.
Well, that's the thing. Like, I think we've never actually discussed like specific time frames, but Godric and Arnell haven't been together. They've actually known each other since childhood, which we haven't, but we've obviously been together for a long time. We've married a while.
I was going to say, you don't really have a Scottish lilt, I'm afraid.
No. Robin. Are you kidding, Robin?
Oh God. Actually, Robin, your Scottish accent is one of the prime examples of someone saying do a Scottish accent, and then you're replying, which one of the 300 Scottish accents do you want me to do?
Yeah, exactly. I will say, though, I don't think, Roman, I hope you don't mind me like saying on the podcast, but I'm pretty sure we have before. Like, Robin and I spoke at length about this before going. We didn't read the wiki. We wanted to screw the game, but
honestly, screw the wiki, man's too big.
But obviously, we did have the we had the benefit of obviously playing loads of tabletop, and D&D and things like that. And sometimes, especially if you're into the role play, which we both are, in-character romances have come up, and we have discussed what we're comfortable with in TTRPGs and what we're not, especially when there's been times where we've both been playing in different games. Sometimes we're playing in the same, the same games, and our characters have different sexual preferences and things like that. So we were very hot on, like, we had a couple of bad experiences in TTRPGs, unfortunately, where safety tools weren't implemented. So coming into LARP, we had a little bit of a we know we have to discuss this. So we basically laid out what's okay and what's not okay. At
the end of the day, like, TTRPGs very, very much, it's kind of like we were saying earlier, it's a different ball game. It's very easy to be like, these are just imaginative fantasies. That's kind of that's acceptable human kind of subconscious behavior or even conscious behavior. As soon as you're in a field with real people, you're like, oh, that's a lot more complicated. There's a whole other level of complex, right? because particularly when people often LARP as versions of themselves, that's a bit fun times. So and kind of that can be one of the tricky things. Although I know plenty of players in the field that have in-character relationships and are married to other people who also have other in-character relationships, and I guess they kind of get very good at kind of knowing what those boundaries are and kind of being able to talk about them and kind of understanding it as it's all just a game and it's all just a story. However, those people that I'm talking about have been LARPing for years, and I would not necessarily I wouldn't want to be in a situation where I was new to LARP and married, and we're just kind of going to go, we can have in-character relationships with other people, because I think there's not necessarily insecurity in in a given relationship, more so insecurity in what the hell I'm doing in LARP, right? You kind of got to. You can't run before you walk, especially
if you trying to find your feet. Only because obviously I can't speak for people that have been doing a long time. They're just I've got an in character wife, like you said, and they've probably gone through all that, and they maybe have the experience and they know that they're kind of used to it. But I kind of highlight our example because if someone comes into LARP and they see people having these different relationships in roleplay, and then people like Robin and myself having that relationship in roleplay, people might then just go, I assume that this is totally okay for me to go and proposition this person and start this in roleplay, because we're putting out there, this is our roleplay. People aren't seeing the messages that Godric and Mercy are sending between each other, being like, is it okay if we explore this role play more? They just see us doing it, and they're like, it's totally okay then to walk up to someone and do a theatrical, slap across the face with a gauntlet. It's like, that might not be the best example, but it's that type of thing that could be skirting the edge of something.
Please OC ask someone if you can actually slap them with a gauntlet, and then have a ref nearby, and preferably someone from medical, because they might get a broken nose. But what you're saying is absolutely right. And it's very easy to kind of slip up, and I think it's one of those things that that while difficult, I think it needs to be forgivable, particularly with new players. I think you need to go, look, I totally get what you're saying. You're excited, you're doing this, you're seeing this, but you can only learn to be a better player by screwing up. And you can only, it's like life. Without getting too philosophical, you can only learn to be a better person in life by making mistakes. That's why we are the apex predator. That's why humans won. That's why we've won the evolutionary race. Is because we can learn from our mistakes. And yes, you're absolutely right. In the moment, you're like, oh god, this is awful. I hate these people. You take 6 weeks out of that, you take a step back, you sit down, you go, do you know what, like, that I get it, I know why that happened, and the other person goes, oh no, I'm so sorry, this is awful, like, I'm not gonna do that again, I know what I need to do. And I think there can be an element of it as well, particularly, you're like, if you're so in the moment, you're like, I don't want to break their immersion by being like, hey, are you OC cool if I do this? But actually, if you want to do that, and without getting into too much conversation about Nordic LARP systems, because I have opinions about them.
I have not much idea about them at all.
You might want to, it's something to research, something to kind of talk more widely about. But they do quite a lot of workshopping before they run their LARPs, particularly in smaller systems. And what I mean by workshopping, they do lots of workshops around kind of consent, and they have periods of time where you're with all the people that you're going to be LARPing with, and you have very explicit conversations. Hey, I know your. They provide you with characters and the story. Then they kind of the rough outlines of the story as you're going into it. So you're like your character. You can be like, hey, I want to have these kinds of interactions with your character. What are you okay with? What are you not? And then at some point over the weekend, you have those interactions, and you're able to do that without having to check in with them just beforehand. And you've got that that kind of drive behind you. It can actually be so much more immersive. So if I know that this isn't going to happen, by the way, but for example, if I know that Mercy wants to challenge Godric for Aranel's hand in marriage, I would message you like weeks in advance, be like, "Hey, dude, hey, dude, can I do this as a cool piece of drama? I fully intend to like, even if to be honest, I do it as a cool piece of drama, fully intending to let you panel beat me in the glory square and win, because it's a good spectacle. Because I love making game for other people. In that I like causing trouble, but we'll get to that. We'll get to causing trouble because we're not even got to causing trouble yet. But yeah, so there's that. But I'm gonna go.
Fun, by the way, isn't it?
That is fun. Yeah.
But those back and forwards through messages to be like, oh yeah, I'm thinking about this, and that just sparks imagination.
Now there is a part of me. There is an alternative universe somewhere where I'm going, note to self, text Oliver about this because I now want to be panel beaten in the glory square. For what it's worth, I'm already being physically beaten up in the glory square by someone at E1.
It's fine.
But like we're talking
front row seats,
fisticuffs and grappling. We're gonna have like refs and stuff nearby. What else did you expect over a woman? Although it's in all fairness, it's someone misunderstanding something that, not even misunderstanding, it's someone reading far too many steps into something that Mercy said as a pass away. Anyway, besides the point.
So you're telling us it's not Mercy's fault?
Mercy doesn't think it's Mercy's fault.
We will definitely be front row seating.
Please do. No, I just want to make sure that I've answered your question as well, because it's a really important question to answer fully. So go back to way back to the question about bleed. Yeah, I've had it in two contexts, and there are really two big contexts that you can have it in. You can have it in terms of romance and in terms of anger, and I've had it in both. And for me, when it happened to me in a romantic context, I like had a mini panic attack in my head. I was like, oh my god, no, this is the bleed that everyone told me about and to be aware of, and now I don't know what to do with it. And then like I took myself aside for 5 minutes and thought, right, okay, Dave, so those emotions you just kind of felt, that whole like chemicals that went through your bodies, and so how you're quite a good actor, and when you get into something, you really can get into it, and how you're just in a really, really intense moment of role play where the thoughts that were going through your head at the time were actually the thoughts that Mercy was having. So when you felt that emotion, that wasn't yours, it didn't belong to you. And I went, oh shit, right, okay, that makes sense now. It wasn't Dave having those emotions in the same sense. It wasn't Dave's consciousness that was having those emotions. And to the point, it wasn't Dave's consciousness, the consciousness that was having those emotions about the other player. It was Dave's consciousness that was having those emotions. It was Mercy living in Dave's subconscious that was having those emotions about a character that doesn't exist, that's played by another physical human being. And I think only because I broke it down that far was I able to go, oh, okay, this actually makes so much sense, like psychologically I find it really, really neurologically interesting.
Well, I mean, because that's more of a complicated example, because one of the ones that's common is anger and frustration. I haven't actually had it in LARP yet, but anger and frustration at like the D&D table, and you're like, I'm playing this paladin. This paladin believes this. And you're like, I'm actually getting worked up here, and I'm on purpose playing contrary to what Oliver's belief system is. Actually, but I'm actually getting angry.
There are three kinds. I've just remembered the third. I'll get onto the third. But the anger one is the anger one's really weird, because I'm not an angry person at all, like, and almost to the point where it may be slightly problematic how unangry I am. But I I wouldn't necessarily call it anger. I'd definitely call it frustration. Definitely call it effectively the will to be right.
Yeah.
And actually, no, I was pissed. I was pissed off because someone was just being an arsehole. Icy, completely icy.
Yeah.
I was having basically an argument with a noble about why I was doing my test of metal, what it means to be noble, why they did their test of metal, actually that they don't serve the nation in the way that they're supposed to be serving them, blah, blah, blah. We were going for half an hour at each other's throats. And it was like, he was being such a, Icy being such a, and it was really funny because I had a lot of my friends, my OC and IC friends around me just kind of like, what's going on? Where's the fucking popcorn? Like, this is gold. And it got to a point where like someone put their hand on my shoulder and it was like, Mercy, it was like, yeah. It was like, you're never going to win. You know that, right? And I just went, yeah, I know. It was like, so just like, let him win. I was like, yeah, all right. He's like, because we've got time. And I was like, yeah, okay. But I really felt it. And it's really funny. I used to do like model UN stuff in school.
Yeah.
And
that's a good example, actually.
Yeah, that particular frustration. I used to do mock trial stuff as well. It's basically proto LARPing, right? I remember that emotion that I had when I was having that conversation with him, when he was being like absolutely like, no, this is the way that it is. I'm like, but it's not. Don't you think about this like this and this and this and this? I remember I was there having that conversation with him and I was like, oh my God, I've had this emotion before. This is what I felt when I was in a room with 60 delegates from across the world and I was playing.
Like, why does no one care about Mexico?
Well, no, I was, oh God, it was awful. Like I was playing, I got to be really careful actually with what I say now. I was playing a nation that had particular views on women's rights that are slightly untoward.
Mm-hmm.
And the debate was about women's rights. And I was being adamant that like it was one way and not another. And I had all of these voices coming left, right, and center. No one's listening to me, and I was like, oh my God, I've felt this before, and it is really weird. And you kind of do get that bleed, but also you kind of get that there is a sense of satisfaction. There is a catharsis in being like, I've got this emotion out, but it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And I made sure then, as like when it happened, like when it kind of all cooled down, like I caught the guy at the toilet. So I was like, hey, like, are we cool? He was like, dude, like, yeah. This is great. Let's do more of this. I was like, I've got a nemesis now. Yes.
Everyone needs a nemesis.
Everyone needs a nemesis. Pardon, this burpee makes me gassy. No, beer makes me gassy. This isn't even real beer. I'm not drinking at the moment. This is alcohol-free beer.
There's some alcohol-free beers are good.
Yeah. I hope you don't want a sponsorship from Lucky Saint, because honestly, I've tasted better alcohol-free. They're claiming to be the best, the UK's #1 superior unfiltered lager. Do you know what? It's pretty good. But the Peroni 0% actually tastes like Peroni and is delicious. Like
I've heard the Peroni is good. Oh man.
I want to try the
Heineken Zero. They're
Heineken
really good.
Zero is quite good, yeah. I want to try Tiny Rebel. They're a brewery in Wales. They
Tiny Rebel are pretty great.
Club Tropica. They have an alcohol-free version of that apparently, and I want to try that. Yeah.
We do Tiny Rebel. Robin and I are
big fans, big beer
fans. We're IPA hipsters.
Oh, are you?
Yeah, we're those type. We're those.
I used to have a Beer 52 subscription.
Oh, nice. I used to work in a brewery in a in a hipster brewery. And
I mean, a kind of microbrewery that is no longer a microbrewery. But
yeah,
they got too popular.
I went to Bristol University. I lived in Bristol for 4 years. I know exactly what microbreweries are. Anyway, to get back to my point. So anger being the second bleedy emotion. And I think really the one with anger is a very selfish emotion. And it's very much a case of recognizing when you need to time yourself out and just go and chill and do nothing and go, cool, it's just a game, we're fine. The third emotion is sorrow.
Yeah.
And oh my God. This is just, it was the most incredible moment of LARP, but perhaps the most devastating. So Mercy made really good friends at the Winter Market, really good friends, and kind of their hall, and they kind of like gave her a favor. They exchanged artworks with each other, as in like she made an artwork of him and he made a song for her. And every time, you know, she'd go off to fight, he'd be like, "Oh, don't get yourself killed," blah, that sort of thing. Anyway, E3 was the horrific donut of death in Wintermark, and she had very distinct lineage trappings. And I remember being there, like, because we were playing the barbarians.
We were,
I remember standing there and watching everyone go past and thinking, I didn't see the horns. I must have just missed them. Anyway, I got back to camp and started doing it. Taking my clothes up, not my clothes. Started taking my clothes. It was really hot. Actually, you know, I probably did change shirt to be fair. Started taking armor off or whatever. And like I poured a drink in our group tent and I sat down and no, I didn't sit down. I was stood up and my Earl came in. He said, "Mercy, you're gonna want to sit down for this." And I took a seat, like my butt hit the seat, and I went, "Oh, come on, who's died?" And he said the name, and I just bolted. I like full sprint across the field. And her hall was stood outside their tent, and they turned to me, they look and they shake their head, and I literally fell to my knees and I just screamed. And it was all I could do to stop myself from crying. And then someone else kind of came up and said some words to Mercy, kind of interestingly, kind of that event I'd done a Twilight Masquerade. All to understand, funnily enough, to understand connections with people, to understand I'd done it as a drow gear, to kind of face Mercy's fear about winter magic, to try and understand death more, and dealing with that, but also to have deeper connections with people, because drow gear have this thing where they people that are close to them become like a pack, and they become incredibly intensely protective over them. And she was part of Mercy's pack, and it was all I could do to not cry. And I was like holding it in, and Dave wasn't there anymore. He checked out, and I was just walking, and it was like something had been ripped away from me. And like members of my house like walked past, they were like, "Mercy, are you okay?" I was like, "Don't, like, I need to go and find someone." And the person who'd cast Twilight Masquerade on me was also a priest, and we discussed why I was doing it. And I knelt down at the campfire, and they were in a deep conversation with someone, and I just sitting there, and she was like, "I'm really sorry, someone has just sat down at my camp, and I think they need me." And they pulled me to one side and said, "Do you need to go somewhere private?" And I was like, "Yeah." And we sat down, and I just burst into tears while I told her the story. I was crying, she was crying, and I was like, I can't remember what I said, but she like turned to me and she was like, "Take like the lessons that you wanted to learn, you've learned them in a way that I could never imagine that you would." And I think this is perhaps the most virtuous casting of Twilight Masquerade ritual I've ever seen, and it made me cry more. And I just, we kind of had a hug, and I formed a bond with that person again that was really, really deep and kind of rooted in in kind of complex story and emotions, and I've done this in several places and several times across the field. It's interesting though, because as one friend dies, another one comes into your life. I remember just walking away being like, holy crap, it feels like someone's actually died.
Yeah, it's pretty powerful. It really is. That might actually be a bit of a shock. I mean, especially I know people go for it in Dawn as well. But I think it could possibly be a shock for someone coming into LARP for the first time. I don't know what it's like at other LARP systems, but I know Empire, like, you know, death is that people get really into the morning
really
role play.
Yeah,
you know, and that can hit hard. People might be coming to the weekend being like, oh, it's all going to be, we're going to run around, we're going to drink alcohol and hit people with swords, and they might not be expecting that. But that's I mean, I was kind of I was kind of expecting it anyway with Dawn, and I just, as a person anyway, I cry at every film, don't I, Robin? Even just
you
like,
really do, and that's the thing.
It's not really a film that I don't cry at.
Oh, then yeah.
I would probably cry at Jackass or something. I do.
Everything is in tears.
I am also a crier. It's fine.
But the thing is, I'm not. And...
You've got to have the one person in the relationship that isn't a crier.
Oh no, there's sometimes it's like the most touching, beautiful thing ever. I'm like, and I turn around and Rob's just like yawning, looking at the phone.
Saying that, it's like, yeah, I'm not really much of a crier or anything. And then I didn't expect to ever like have like I witnessed all these things at every single event, you know, E1, 2, and 3, watch people cry and things like that. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's so emotional, but nothing. And it wasn't until E4 when we were finishing our test of metal, and I was standing there, and I was I think I was slightly concussed, but I was going
to say, you had just been hit in the head, hadn't you?
I was saying everything to Godric, and I felt at that moment that, like you just said there, and that's what really resonated with me there. Like, I wasn't Robin anymore. I was Arnell, and I was there, and I was just like, the tears coming down my face, and I could feel them, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm crying. This is new. And then it was like, it's so emotional, and there was so much. And whenever I think back to that moment, I don't picture myself and Oliver. I picture Aranel and Godric, and I picture like something totally different. And it's I mean, so powerful.
There's a reason why I find it really difficult to talk about the things I've done at Empire, and to remember to say that Mercy did this.
Yes.
Because I'm always there, and it was always actually, no, I did this. Like, this is the thing that I did. It's really hard. It's really hard, and it's really strange. But it's kind of one of those wonderful things, and I think like it's LARP is one of those hobbies where you get out what you put in. And if you just kill self-consciousness and go, we're all in a field, we all look a bit silly. If I watch this on camera, I'd probably think that, I look like an idiot, even though that I know I look quite good in the photos that get taken of me. Photos are very different to filming. But as soon as you start going, everyone's doing this and we're doing this together. Within 10 minutes, to the first 5 to 10 minutes are a bit jarring. Then within 15 minutes, you're like you're running around a field finding someone, and you're finding that person, but you know that person as a character. You hear time and time again people going, yeah, I know this person. No idea what their out of character name is, but I know the character.
I have a load of people like that. I have a load of people that I know them from their kit. If they walk past me in the street, I would just...
Seriously, I've spent months trying to find this bloody winter marker.
Honestly,
I'm still going on about this winter marker. I will find them.
So hilariously, there's an orc who's, unfortunately, the orc has now passed away. The player's fine, but he messaged me on Facebook once because I put a call out asking for some armor repairs to be done. He's like, "What do you need?" Messaged me on Facebook like, "What do you need?" I was like, "Oh, this, and this, and this." And then I suddenly realised I had to find him at E2, but I didn't know what he looked like because I'd never seen him without an orc mask on. Never mind the fact that I find it very difficult to distinguish between orcs as it is. because their faces all just look like green blob to my head until you focus for a bit.
Talk to Robin, because Robin, hang on.
Do you keep doing that?
I'm pretty sure we talk so much now. I have no idea what's been recorded. What hasn't. We'll tell it again. Well, why don't you tell it? So Robin has a real like.
I have an issue with faces. Okay, I can't distinguish faces people. Very well. If there's a load of men, for example, of a similar age, of similar hair tones, I'll struggle to remember who is who.
Oh, Robin's literally turned around and been like, and she's not she's like, oh, is that person? I'm like, no, the person you're talking about was at our wedding. How can you think that person is that person?
I can't do it, but with the Imperial orcs,
nothing.
I know all of them.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I can tell the difference between them from just a quick glance at an image or from a quick passing, and I'm like, oh, that's you, such and such. Oh, that's such and such.
Oh, yeah, Skywise such and such.
Oh my god.
I don't know what it
is.
That's
Iron-Tide such and such.
That's
like,
crazy.
What?
Well, I think
it's been cool for me because it's the first time in my life I've been able to distinguish that quickly.
Yeah.
It's Imperial orcs.
Everyone just needs to adapt and have an orc mask now in real life. Just so
that's what I need, and I think it's because although the base orc masks all are very much the same or similar, each one of them does a different. Yeah. Well, it's a lot of them do a different it's the markings and the hair features, and then the color of their wraps.
Yeah,
that together is enough for me to be able to distinguish them.
What?
But that's it.
So, I mean, to be honest, the orc, it took me a while before I actually. It's funny because I only recognize him to begin with. So I met him at a very small player event in late 2021, and then I met him next at E1 in character. The only reason I knew who it was because he calls Mercy Precious, and he just went, "Hello, Precious," and I was like, "Hello. What's your name again?" And the few interactions I then had, I started recognizing. As soon as it gets dark or anything in that orc camp, I'm gone. You can imagine me then at E4 when I finally can recognize him, finally know his name, rock up, and I go into the orc camp and I'm like, "Hey, I'm here to find this person." They're like, "Cool, he's just through there." Went for a walk and I was like, "No, he's not." And he goes, "Hello, Precious." I'm like, "Why is your face white?" And he's like, "Our faces go white when we get old." And I went, "Oh."
And we were learning about this actually. We were learning that they go old, they go old overnight. So they don't just slowly age. They just turn.
Yeah. And I was like, "Oh, okay, fine." But yeah, it took me a while. It took me a long while. Oh God, there was something we were going to talk about that I've forgotten. I mentioned it earlier. I was like, "Oh, we'll talk about that later." And it's gone now.
We
barely talked about
the
music.
cheeky things that Mercy had gotten up to, I believe, like the mischievous things. I think.
Oh yes, it was.
He was. Yes.
Years. No, making trouble. Right. If we talk about any one final thing, right? Is making game and causing trouble. There is so much to be said. I'll be really careful how I phrase this, but I think because we come from, it's twofold. We come from a very now Discord online, dopamine driven world of expectations with regards to Empire, because that's what we had for so long. Because we have a lot of tabletop RPGs where you get these big moments and you're the main character, and it's your story to solve, it's your problem, you're the plot. There is a lot of the player base that I've noticed that go, "I want to get this, I want to get the big plot, and I want to get it now, and that's the only way that I can win the game. That's the only way that I can feel satisfied. It's the only way I can get that release of dopamine is if I solve the big problems." And I'm like, "Well, it's going to take a long time, and I don't have the mental resources to do this. I can't be asked." And this field is so saturated with people doing that. I'm like, I don't want to get involved in that rat race. And as a consequence, I do one of two things. I've often been called a catalyst by dungeon masters before. Yeah. I'll do one of two things. One, I'll go up to someone that I know is important and I know that knows me and go, like, "You got anything for me to do?" or like, or hey, you there, Cardinal, can you anoint me? And just run with it and see what they want you to do or whatever. Because then you effectively get a side quest, but in Empire, a side quest is your whole weekend.
Yeah,
and I think that's what more people need to realize is that you're like fundamentally you will get the big plot eventually, but right now as a new player, no one knows who you are and nobody cares. So you've got to make people care and make people know who you are. Yes, you can do that very quickly if you chase the game in a particular way. And some people have been very successful at doing that. But from an outside perspective, to me, it does often look like it's forced. And it does often look like, I want to get this big game, so I'm going to put myself in this position so that I can get this big game.
Yeah, and you can ruffle feathers that way as well.
Yeah, you can. You can
in character and out of character.
In character and out of character. Whereas for me, what matters to me most is it feeling natural and getting to that point naturally. I've got ideas that I want to be an archmage in the future. I've got ideas that I want to be the high bard or be a cardinal. Lol. But I don't want to do them all at once. I don't want to do them all straight away. I want to get there because I bloody deserve to be there. I want to get there because as a player, I deserve to now have that moment in that position of power where I have the genuine respect and authority of people around me. And how do you do that? You get yourself some side quests. And that's the causing trouble side of things, and frankly, that's one of my favorite things to do, and I want to do more of that this year. I went up to someone at E1, I went up to the then Cardinal of Vigilance, and I said, "Hey, can you anoint me?" Forgetting that the Cardinal of Vigilance at the time, the character was ever so slightly evil. And I didn't ask him what anointment I wanted from him. He just anointed me. And long and short was like, I anoint you with the price of vigilance. It's like, cool. It's like, I will name a thing in this anointment, and you have to relentlessly seek out that thing, no holds barred, like whatever it takes. You do this thing. He was like, I understand that there is potentially beginnings of a hate cult in the marches, and I want you to root out the perpetrators of that hate cult and bring them to me and bring them to justice. And I was like, cool. And so I did. I went around the marches, all around the marches, and I asked them all, I was like, what do you feel about love? And they were like, I describe the feeling to me. It was like, yeah, I've been there, done that. Until I came across one person that said, oh, what do you think about love? And they went, oh, you mean that awful acidic feeling in your throat when you kind of like see something you like? And I was like, yeah. How would you describe the opposite of that feeling? They were like, oh, that lovely warm and butterfly feeling in your stomach. I was like, cool. And I ran and I found this Cardinal of Vigilance. I was like, I found the person with the hate cult. I found them. And he was like, where? I was like, in the marches. So he was like, okay. I was like, do you want me to accost them and bring them back? He was like, yes, Mercy, go. And I was like, cool. And I ran. And I didn't have any armor at the time. I had a sword. And I walked into the marches. And I saw one person that I knew this other person, or no, that I knew and had met before. And I pulled my sword out, gesticulated, pointed towards them, and I said, where is this person? And then I had 5 halberds like at my throat. I had a knife at my back. I got taken down to like 1 hit point. I was disarmed. And I had 6 marchers being like, get the heck out of here, or we're going to kill you and put your body in a bag. And I was like, can I at least have my sword back, please? Happily, there was a member of the militia nearby who was like, give him his sword back. And then he turned to me and went, you better fucking run. And I ran. I was like, Cardinal of Vigilance. What? They attacked me. And he stood up and everyone just, and the whole Vigilance Assembly stood up, and he picked up people along the way, and we marched into the marches. And it was all my fault. That was the first 2 hours of E1 I nearly got killed.
Yeah, that's fascinating hearing that story, because I heard about the story in character from Mercy and other sources.
It gets better. Transpires then later that evening, there was a group of marchers walking around in full clank, like not necessarily looking for me, but looking to find where I was so that they weren't there. But I was at the camp of the Cardinal of Vigilance at the time. I'd just gone to the loo, and I came back, and I kind of put my cloak, had my cloak on, and had my flower crown on my head. And as I approached the camp, I could see these armored marchers, and one of the people from the camp like comes up to me really close. He's like, no, you do not want to be here right now. I'm like, why? He's like, they're looking for you. I'm like, shit. He's like, yeah, like run. And I like de-girded myself. I threw my flower crown on the floor. I like hood up Assassin's Creed style, wrap my cloak around me. And I spent the rest of the evening, I was like, cool, I got a friend in Wintermark, let's go to Wintermark. And they weren't there. I was like, shit. I got someone I know in the Navarre, let's go to the Navarre. So I went to Navarre. They weren't there. I was like, shit. I was leaving the Navarre. I was like, Conclave. There's people I know in Conclave right now, and if they're wearing Clank, they can't get into Conclave. Clever. Right. Let's find a way to... Shit. Conclave's the other side of the field across a load of open ground, and I have no protection. So I was like, oh, fine. I'll hire a Bravo or something. Like, I was near the league. And like, I was asking around and no one was there. I was like, fine, I guess I'll just sneak my way there. So I like hood up and walked along. Ended up walking alongside these 4 guys. And I had my hood up and I Assassin's Creed style blended in with them. And I was really hungry at this point. And these guys went into Moorish and they were like, oh, you're going to go get food. I was like, cool. So I was like, cool, I'm going to fucking go into Moorish with them. Anyway, they were talking. They mentioned they were mercenaries. And I went, hey, I'm looking for some people to be my protection. I paid them a throne to walk me from Moorish to Conclave. And it was hilarious. It wasn't hilarious. It was brilliant. One of the most amazing bits of roleplay I think I've had all year. Was we ate dinner together. It was lovely. Made some new friends, cool guys, whatever. We got up. We left Moorish. As soon as we leave Moorish, the 4 people were 1, 2, like it was me, 1, 2, 3, 4, like around me in a kind of figure of 4. And we were walking. The captain of this kind of, and it turns out he was the captain of the Navarre skirmish crew. Yeah. Nice. This guy like sees a couple more people that they know, and they went, you and you, I need a figure of 6 around this individual now. Don't ask any questions. Don't say anything. And I had a full-on presidential like bodyguard suite around me, with my hood up, like walking through. They got me into Conclave, but 2 of them actually came into Conclave with me, and they put their hands on my shoulders and they went, before we let you go into Conclave, what did you do? And I told that whole story, and it was brilliant. And I didn't see them all evening, but honestly, like causing trouble, one of the most amazing things. And I guess on the flip side, which I made game for an entire nation, right? In just one stupid mistake, because I thought this will be a fun thing to do, right? But in terms of like making game for other people, I mean, I can't even count the amount of times that I've done that, but it's just so satisfying when you sit there and you go look at the chaos that I've caused. I decided to do a silly thing. I poked at the game and the game's kind of just exploded. Yeah. And everyone's worried about the big sweeping plot arcs across the Empire. I'm like, that's nice and wonderful and it's a good story, but it's nowhere near as satisfying as pissing off the entirety of the marches because you drew a sword out once and said you were looking for someone that they liked pretty much.
Yeah, because that's the thing, that the best LARP stories come from people's personal experiences. Is that oh yeah, we were sat in a tent and we discussed this. It's not like, oh, I mean, it's obviously interesting when you'll sit there talking about what's happening in the campaign. Oh yeah, you know, this is happening with the barons, this is happening with that, and that's the outer campaign, you know, and what you're going to get from it. But the best tales are, and it's very personal as well. And I understand what you mean about, I mean, it's almost like in D&D, it's like the Matt Mercer effect, isn't it? People like look and go, oh yeah, I totally want to do what those people are doing, and they come and they're like, oh, I totally want to storm Conclave because I heard this other character did, and that's not always the case. But sometimes when you're doing something, you're like, nah, and then when you tell it back, and that's what I love about frothing about LARP, because sometimes you don't realize how freaking awesome it is until you start retelling the story, and then you realize that all these people,
real story,
exactly, and literally every single person in that field has one. Doesn't matter if you think that you're doing nothing all weekend, you have one. And like you say, notoriety is definitely a thing. To get you plot, because that will get you plot.
And I think the fundamental. Oh, sorry, Robin, do you want to say something?
Oh no, I was just gonna say, like, I was gonna ask you, like, so you did all that literally E1?
Yeah, 2 hours in.
I thought I misheard you at first when you were like, oh yeah, E1. I was like, No way.
I peaked pretty soon.
Way.
Yeah.
Surely not peak.
I didn't. I wasn't. It wasn't. It was. I set myself a bar and went, "That's the bar I need to hit every time," because that was incredible.
That's what you need to do.
But, I mean, and I think the fundamental crux, like to kind of wrap that whole thing up, and what you were just saying about you can sit there and go, well, I want to go in and do this. I want to go in and march conclave because someone has before. I want to go in and do a thing in this because I've heard this story. I want to do this. I want to do that. I want to do the other. That's all well and good, but you can only do that if the opportunity arises.
Yeah.
And it's far better, far more fun, far more immersive, and far less time consuming to play the game reactively than to play it proactively. And what you're doing there is you're trying to play the game proactively. You're trying to play it like someone that's got a strategy. The problem is that the best plans fail at first contact with the enemy.
Yeah.
And actually what I prefer to do is go, I've got some vague goals that I want to hit, and they're mostly out of character goals. Like my test of metal, I have no idea if it's going to succeed. I sent an email to Matt P. I was like, Matt, can I just double check that this is mechanically possible? And he replied saying, this is mechanically possible. Yeah. Good luck. This is the hardest test of metal I've ever seen, but it's also really epic. So like, I really want to like hear about this as it goes, but you're gonna not be. You can't be proactive. He said you can't chase this because like stuff won't happen. You've got to wait for it to appear, and I'm more than happy to sit and wait for stuff to appear for me to be able to pass my test of metal. Yeah, because it means that I won't be so hung up trying to chase part of a game that when I pass my test of metal, what does that change for Mercy? Nothing really. He's still an arsehole.
Yeah. When really, if that's what you actually want to be like, I'm going to have fun being a noble. You can just be like, oh, in downtime, Mercy succeeded. There we go. Yeah. And then we move on. I do want to ask you, but I'm conscious of your time.
Please
we are going.
Questions.
But what is going on with? Because I know this is slightly linked, and I know because you want your testamental to play out. But you mentioned like Twilight Masquerade. What is going on with Mercy's lineage? Because I have no idea. What...
You can't. I don't know. You can see the on YouTube, but you can see behind me. So the photo I got behind me is of Mercy, and I can send you guys some photos as well if you want to flash me in. Mercy's got antlers and all looks like a changeling. And funnily enough, here's a fun fact. Robin drew Mercy for a lovely little bit of like cartoon. I think you were doing some cartoon work, I think.
Yeah.
And Robin drew Mercy. And I was like, oh, this is awesome. And like I saw the pose that you drew Mercy in and kind of the place and the time, and I was like, and the kind of conversation that was had, and I was like, oh, Robin, this looks incredible, but I hate to break it to you. Not actually a changeling. You're like, what? What do you mean he's not a changeling? I'm like, no, Mercy's not a changeling. He's just like that. Because a lot of the big photos and the good reference photos, like the Ollie Facey one that I've got, he's with Mercy with Antlers because he was Twilight masqueraded as a changeling. Yeah. Broadly because enough people had been like, "Are you sure you're not a changeling?" I'm like, well, I do have a lot of summer magic that flows through me. I do a lot of summer magic, so it's possible that there is some of that is kind of blowing over. But
and
I was
like, I want to see as well, you know.
Yeah, and I'm Dornish, right? It's like I want to see what it's like for him to Twilight masquerade. Turns out when Mercy Twilight masquerades as a changeling, or when Mercy is a changeling, and just take Mercy and you dial him up to 11. There's an IC drug.
11,
yeah. There's an IC drug that does exactly the same thing. I've discovered. But so he's not actually a changeling, which is why then at E2 he was a Draugr, and at E4 people were like, "Oh, you don't have antlers?" I'm like, "No, we don't have antlers." But the interesting thing is now, part of my test of metal is that I can't be a changeling. Mercy can't be a changeling through any means other than the means outlined in the passing of the test of metal. And the final condition for me passing my test of metal is becoming a changeling. So that's what's going on with Mercy's lineage. He don't got one yet.
And that ain't something a human can do, right? That's not something a human can give you, right?
Yeah, no, it's not. So I mean, I can say what my test of metal is as long as I trust people to not take this. I've said it before on live streams, just don't take this into the field. So my test of mettle is okay, so the first part of my test of mettle is that I have to acquire a feather from the Griffin Lord Hayek, who is an Eternal that is currently very out of favor with the Empire, and is very much so in a weakened state in the Summer Realm, and is currently staying with Eleonaris, who really doesn't like the Empire-ish, kind of, maybe. And he got dethroned by an Eternal called Jaehaerys, who is currently weirdly more in favor in the Empire and is doing some interesting dodgy deals. So first thing I've got to do is get a feather from Hayek, which is really hard to do. And or I've been told several times that they exist in play and there may be people that have them. I don't buy it.
Yeah.
But I'd have to, I want to have those conversations anyway. So part of my game this year is going to be talking to merchants of interesting items.
Ooh.
I then have to take that feather and turn it into a quill with which to pen a song that convinces Maraud, the Summer Enchanter, to grant me his boon. And Maraud's boon occasionally is to turn an individual into a changeling. And it has to be, I need to convince Maraud to turn me into a changeling. In order to convince Maraud to turn Mercy into a changeling, the song basically has to be about the great magical deeds that he's done. So he also, in part of this test of metal, I also probably have to do quite a lot of arcane projections and like crazy magical ritual stuff to impress Maraud enough that he's like, yeah, you're pretty cool, and that song was pretty good. Like I'm gonna turn you into a changeling now, and then I pass my test of metal. This is not something, and this is what Matt P said to me. He said, this is not something that will just happen overnight. This will take you years to complete. And I'm like, I'm there for that. To the point, in fact, like I hope Matt won't mind me saying this, but I think he was so invested in my test of metal when I sent this email to him. He was like, look, if you get this feather from Hayek, send me an email, let me know, and I will get you a special ribbon printed that says Hayek feather quill on it.
Oh,
do it.
that is so cool.
And I was like, oh well, I gotta do this now. So yeah, it's pretty cool, but insanely difficult. Like it's funny because like I love watching your guys' game of your test of metal, and I love seeing lots of people do the test of metal, pass the test of metal, and then I got given this test of metal, and I instantly went, because Maya and I chatted about it OC first, and I was like, this is the most cool thing ever, this is epic, and then I sat there for a few weeks, and I went, oh shit, everyone I know has got far easier tests of metal. And I remember that one of the first times I told our Noble about it, they turned to me and went, there are other houses, you know. Are you sure
there
wants you to be in your house?
Well, you know what? That was almost on the tip of my tongue. You know, I was just about to say, do you think it's that difficult that they're telling you that maybe they don't want you?
He's explained to me that he effectively wanted it to be that difficult because Mercy's just joined the nation from the league, and he wants him to really prove himself at the house, but more to a point. And I've argued this philosophy I see as well, so I'll be careful with kind of this, but Mercy's somewhat of the school of thought that there are two ways that you can give someone a difficult test. You can give them a difficult test because you don't want them to be in your house, or you can give them a difficult test because you know that test will push them and prove the glory of your household, because they will do an incredibly glorious deed in the name of your house in order to be part of your house, and they will know how powerful your house is becoming, because actually they got a noble that's done something so difficult to do, like we owe them a lot more respect than we're giving them, because they drive a hard bargain, and I think that's a really cool way to kind of perceive doing tests of metal or setting tests of metal. If you've got players that don't just want to be nobles in a year or two.
Yeah.
If you've got players that are like, oh, like I don't mind how long the test of metal takes. I don't mind being a knight errant. You know, when you've got houses there that have been there for 10 years, and the game is most likely going to at least carry on for another 10 years. Having a test of metal that takes 3 or 4 years to complete is a great story if you complete it.
Oh yeah,
you really don't want your character to die then, but like it's a great story.
Well, even then, it can be a great story. That's the thing. It's going back to what we were saying. It is a game, you know, and that's so for us again. When we say we orchestrated a bit, we were very much like, first year we're going to be not errants.
Yeah,
we want to be noble. Like it wasn't just it wasn't going to be a case of we want this we want the hardest test of metal ever because it's going to be great, but at the same time you
want to get to that point.
I'm getting pissed off with being a yo folk and being we obviously you don't want that, so we wanted something that it was going to give us game and
hey, you're outnumbered.
Well,
here.
like I knew I started off as a yo folk, but and I got my test within the year. Because I was like, do you know what? Like, I don't want to roll in as a knight errant. It doesn't make sense. I want to be a yo. I want to be the working class effectively and see how that feels and have those experiences and chastise nobles. But no, you're absolutely right. And it's, again, a completely valid way to play. And the way you guys have done it has been so like genuine. And you've been like, at the end of the day, you've been yo folk that were like at the point of their lives, you know, now we're ready to be nobles. And you've put your shift and you put your graft and you've gone, we're going to find some tests of metal, people that recognize us for who we are. We're going to pass these tests. And it's not like it's just going to be a formality. They're going to be hard, but we're going to do it. And then we're going to be nobles and it's going to be great. Well, it was good. I love the way you guys have done it.
Yeah, it was satisfying, wasn't it, Robin? Because we were obviously, and we've told this 100 times, we were going for the part of the knight errant brief that said like we wanted to be offered. We didn't want to have. We didn't want to ask for one. We wanted to be offered one.
That's a cool thing to do because not a lot of people do it.
And Danny kind of projected what. Oh, sorry, Danny said what we were trying to project. He literally said the words, "You two are noble. You carry yourselves as noble. You shouldn't be yo folk." Basically, and that's what we were trying. Even though we were saying, "Oh, we're knight errants looking for." Tests of metal, we were acting noble. You know, we came into the game wanting to be noble. So
whereas Mercy's actually had the opposite. I've actually had a noble say like, "You're not. You've got a lot to learn before you're a noble." And I turned around and went, "Yeah, well, you're an asshole." It's like, "Yeah, but I passed the test of metal." I'm like, that is it's my nemesis. If it hadn't occurred to you, that's the guy that's my nemesis.
It's your nemesis. Well, guys, we're over time. We've
been talking for a while.
Yeah, there was a lot I still want to ask you about, which means that we'll probably
bring me back on.
Ask you to come back on again. You know, if you can bear to come back.
I love your guys' company. Fun.
Awesome. Right, we'll better wrap this up. Thank you very much for your time, Dave. Yeah, it's been very insightful and very fun. So we'll say goodbye to the podcast, everyone.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
If you enjoyed this show, make sure that you follow and ring the bell so you know when a new episode is posted. If you want to check out some of Dave's work, all his links are down below. But now we're going to leave you with a song from our Dornish bard, Mercy Summermuse.
The Tale of Dawn and the Dragon. Terrorized by blood and fear, sullied at the gates, left no room to shed a tear, killed without a trace. And you'll hear it in the village, and you'll hear it in the town, that the mountains are the palace where the dragon wears his crown. They called upon the valiant, the fearless and the true, to fight for them and those they loved and do all they could do. And you'll hear it in the village, and you'll hear it in the town, that the mountains are the palace where the dragon wears his crown. Glory, glory, the fight with all their glory, for dawn will kill the dragon in the cavern where it lay. Glory, glory, the fight with all their glory, the fight with might and courage, and the dragon they will slay. Gathered up in Semaholm, prepared to march along, confront the beast, defend their homes, and 50,000 strong. And you'll hear it in the village, and you'll hear it in the town, that the mountains are the palace where the dragon wears his crown. Banners flying in the breeze, all houses march as one. Crimson, silver, gold and green, all colours join the throng, and you'll hear it in the village and you'll hear it in the town, that the mountains are the palace where the dragon wears his crown. Glory, glory, the fight with all their glory, for dawn will kill the dragon in the cavern where it lay. Glory, glory, the fight with all their glory, the fight with might and courage, and the dragon they will slay. The mountain rose in front of dawn inside the dragon's lair. They'll camp at night and charge at morn to keep the fighting fair, and you'll hear it in the village and you'll hear it in the town, that the mountains are the palace where the dragon wears his crown. Heroes woken from their sleep, their armour weapons donned, as fire around the camp did leap to cries from battle horns, and you'll hear it in the village and you'll hear it in the town, that the mountains are the palace where the dragon wears his crown. Glory, glory, the fight with all their glory, for dawn will kill the dragon in the cavern where it lay. Glory, glory, the fight with all their glory, the fight with might and courage, and the dragon they will slay. It flies across the battlefield, its wings as roaring wind, its teeth, its sword, its scale, its shield drowns out the army's din, and you'll hear it in the village and you'll hear it in the town, that the mountains are the palace where the dragon wears his crown. It dives and strikes the Dornish line, throws soldiers to their feet. Dragon claws and swords entwine with armour they can't beat, and you'll hear it in the village and you'll hear it in the town, that the mountains are the palace where the dragon wears his crown. Glory, glory, the fight with all their glory, for dawn will kill the dragon in the cavern where it lay. Glory, glory, the fight with all their glory, the fight with might and courage, and the dragon they will slay. Arrows set and fly from bows and strike the dragon hide, but it's so tough that all their blows off its armour glide, and you'll hear it in the village and you'll hear it in the town, that the mountains are the palace where the dragon wears its crown. A bowman in the archer line spies the armour's chink. They set their aim, their arrow flies and finds a missing link, and you'll hear it in the village and you'll hear it in the town, that the mountains are the palace where the dragon wears its crown. Glory, glory, the fight with all their glory, for dawn will kill the dragon in the cavern where it lay. Glory, glory, the fight with all their glory, they'll fight with might and courage, and the dragon they will slay. On the ground the dragon's flame engulfs the shield wall, but the fire in its heart was tamed when it took its fall, and you'll hear it in the village and you'll hear it in the town, that the mountains are the palace where the dragon wears its crown. A warrior burst through the line, her longsword brandished high. She drove it in the armour's side and watched the dragon die, and you'll hear it in the village and you'll hear it in the town, that the mountains are the palace where the dragon wears his crown. Glory, glory, the fight with all their glory, for dawn will kill the dragon in the cavern where it lay. Glory, glory, the fight with all their glory, the fight with might and courage, and the dragon they will slay. 100 years have come and gone since peace befell the land. No more dragons threaten dawn, the last one took its stand, and you'll hear it in the village and you'll hear it in the town, that the mountains are the palace where the dragon wears its crown. And so my tale is said and done, of glory bold and grand, but remember all the day that dawn reclaimed their motherland, and you'll hear it in the village and you'll hear it in the town, that the mountains are the palace where the dragon wears his crown. Hey! Glory, glory, they'll fight with all their glory, for dawn will kill the dragon in the cavern where it lay. Glory, glory, they'll fight with all their glory, they'll fight with might and courage, and the dragon they will slay. Hey, glory, glory, they'll fight with all their glory, for dawn will kill the dragon in the cavern where it lay. Glory, glory, they'll fight with all their glory, they'll fight with might and courage, and the dragon they will slay.